The Master Tavern Keeper's History of the Old World. I see. So there are, on occasion, chaos dwarfs in Skeggi, it seems. And this attack by a thunder lizard just happened to be one of those times. How did they help then, Master Tavern Keeper? Well, if you recall, the exiled archmage Calhordis Whitemane had just enchanted the thunder lizard using his high magics. And the Norse of Skeggi had taken the opportunity to encircle the beast in a ring of burning fire. The fuel used was actually a combination of pitch from local trees and sulphur, so it burnt easily, but also lasted a long time, and smelled quite foul. Anyway, this meant that the creature was temporarily halted, but we needed it permanently stopped. The weapons of the marauding Norsemen were in no way enough to fell such a monster. Blows by blade caused nothing worse than nicks, and our bolts were no better than mosquito bites. And so, it was at this point that the Chaos Dwarves appeared, being led there by my own boss, Morgrim Goldbeard. Trust him to get involved. Well, thank goodness he did. I doubt they'd have raised a finger had he not. Sowieso, I do not doubt their fighting skills, but what could a few Chaos Dwarfs do that a whole port of chaotic marauders could not? Well, it was not what they could do. Rather, it was what they brought with them. And what was that? A pair of enormous Hellcannons. And what might they be? Much more than your regular cannon, let me assure you. However, when I first laid eyes on one, I mistook them for some sort of traditional war machine. The main part of the weapon was a gigantic cannon, whose aperture was extremely, unusually wide. This was set up on a base, a chassis, that both supported the main weapon and allowed it to be aimed. This base had 3 pairs of wheels of various sizes that allowed it to be moved, as well as chains lashing it to the ground. I have fought alongside numerous cannons during my life, and no doubt those chains were there to help stabilize it against recoil. Yes, I thought so too, but no. They've another function, actually, which I will come to shortly. Well, go on then. What did these Hellcannons do there in Skeggi? Indeed. Let us finish off a retelling of the attack of the Thunder Lizard on the Lustrian Port of Skeggi. Skeggi, 1553. As I stood there on the ramparts of the barricade, ostensibly commanding the Norse bolt throwers, I decided to pull out my old nautical telescope to see what was going on. I first saw 2 trios of Chaos Dwarves slowly trundling forwards with the 2 Hellcannons. Behind them was a gaggle of hobgoblins, many carrying shovels, others pulling pig iron sleds, but both brandishing vicious daggers. The machines they followed were so strange to behold. Each appeared to growl and shake as the Dawizar escorted them onwards, towards the Thunder Lizard. The dwarves did not push nor pull them, but rather they moved of their own volition, their mechanized wheels grinding forwards as spiraling, dirty smoke continuously leaked out from each, dancing over and then pouring off the bodies of the 2 cannons before snaking up into the sky behind them, like each was a snoozing dragon encased in armor. I was, of course, yet to learn the truth.
The dwarves about the cannons, each clad in long scaled tunics and wielding hammers and wrenches, looked like the handlers of some beast rather than an artillery crew, and they led each Hellcannon by long chains. The two Darizar teams eventually reached what must have been their optimal range, and stopped. The dwarves took out large, heavy iron spikes attached to the ends of the chains they'd been carrying, and then hammered them into the ground behind each Hellcannon. As they performed this task, the hobgoblin mob that had been trailing behind them streamed past the two war machines, each giving the artillery pieces a wide berth, it has to be said, and ran towards the ring of fire surrounding the Thunder Lizard. This left only Goldbeard at the rear. I watched him stroll over and grab one of the empty pitch barrels that lay strewn about, plonking it down to use as a seat. Meanwhile, the hobgoblins, carrying the shovels, sprinted and leapt over the fiery perimeter. Most made it. Those that didn't and caught fire were quickly put out of their miseries by their comrades using their shovels, a malicious glee on their faces as they did it, before the smouldering, freshly dead were shovelled into their sleds on the other side of the fire.
This is so bizarre, Master Tavern Keeper. What were these greenskins doing?
Ah, well, I thought exactly the same, actually. But listen on, and things will become alarmingly clear. The stricken hobgoblins were not the only bodies to be shovelled up. What they were really there for were the dead Norse that had been squashed and killed by the Thunder Lizard. The greenskins ran around the monstrous creature's feet, shoveling up what remained of the dead before returning to pile up the dead, trampled corpses and body parts into the metal sleds. Once these were full of the dead, the hobgoblins, pulling them, spun around and ran back, full pelt towards the Hellcannons. In the interim, the Darizar had lowered the elevation of the two cannons so that they were horizontal, and they also set up a small set of steps at the mouth of each. Here I had expected to see them load gigantic cannonballs into the belly of the cannons, but they clearly had none, and instead simply poured in strange liquids as they waited for the return of their green-skinned slaves. Each hobgoblin left their sled next to the Hellcannon before fleeing, as if in fear of losing their very lives, far to the rear of the artillery pieces, the place where Goldbeard was still sat upon his barrel, smoking some pipeweed and drinking from a large flask that he always carried. It was now that things took a darker turn, and my own realization as to what the Hellcannons truly were began. Firstly, the Chaos Dwarves started to load each war machine by shoveling the bodies the hobgoblins had brought into the Hellcannon's fiery furnace. I could scarcely believe it. I trained my telescope onto Goldbeard, and I could make out him screwing up his features and pinching his nose. I quizzed him on what was going on later.
Bah, Grimnes Dongles, it was foul. The Darizar were hurling the remains their slaves had gathered up into what they called the weapon's dire furnace. A thing that burns so hot as to turn flesh into rivers of fat and gristle before it fizzled away to naught but sickly fumes and splinter bones into tiny fragments that flecked and burnt in acrid smoke. I knew what they were doing, of course, Umge. They were purifying out the soul stuff of the dead, funneling it into the Hellcannon's gullet. Of course, There was nothing pure about the process, and it smelt worse than a Narwangler's hand drag.
And so, with the heart of each weapon filled with crackling bolts of soul power, the Chaos Dwarves took aim at the motionless Thunder Lizard and fired. The searing white, raw soul energy soared through the air, arcing up and then coming down with practiced precision upon their target. Where they struck, they liquefied the flesh of the great creature. Burnt slabs of muscle, bone and flesh, sloughing off the monster's shoulder and barrel chest. This sent the beast into extreme shock, and it collapsed onto the ground. Suddenly, unearthly, growling screams came from the two Hellcannons, and the chains that had lashed them to the ground were ripped up, spinning wildly into the sky. One of the artillery pieces tore away from its crew towards the stricken Thunder Lizard, but before it got very far, the second exploded, engulfing both the other Hellcannon, wrecking it, and then dousing the two groups of Chaos Dwarves in roaring doomfire, completely incinerating the Dowie.
What? Master Tavern Keeper, by the gods, what are these Hellcannons?
Ah, well, my dear Heinrich, they are no mere artillery piece. They are an amalgamation of a metal war machine cage that holds within it a yoked and bound demon from the realm of chaos. A demon engine, if you like, and utterly powerful and devastating. Be that when they shoot, or when they cut loose and charge into close combat. In the aftermath of the explosion, the surviving hobgoblins suddenly let out a high-pitched, evil cheer. But this didn't last long, as our very own Goldbeard pulled out his hammer and began to fell the greenskins. There were many, though, and I was sure this was to be the end of my benefactor, when, suddenly, I saw our very own dwarf berserker, Strolvar, running like a madman out of the main gate towards the melee. I, too, raced down the stairs of the rampart, out of the main gate and towards the fight, but by the time I arrived, all the greenskins were dead, and the two dwarves were arguing, although I didn't catch much of what was said, as both stopped talking at my approach.
Bugger it, berserker! Enough! This is not a conversation to be having now. Strovar, listen. Look! That thing still lives!
Goldbeard? Strolvar? What's going on here?
Whose side are you on? Manlin! Keep your eye on this Goldbeard here. Make sure he knows where his loyalties should lie. Wanset, get your cleaver out of its sheath and come with me.
And this I did. I accompanied Strolvar all the way to the felled Thunder Lizard, and between us we were able to put it out of its misery. First, cutting its throat, but finally decapitating the beast. It's best to be sure